What's up? What's up?
Welcome to the Big Ben Show. It's me, Alex Watson, aka Songbird. I'm here without Lester again today. So Lester will be back next week. In the studio with me today, I've got Lee Jasper, and from the Barak organisation, and also from the Respect Party. And I've got Rashid Nix again, who was here last week, but he didn't really get to finish what he wanted to talk about. So I've invited him back on the show today to discuss issues of the day. I'd like to say welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
First of all, Lee, RESPECT is an acronym for Respect, Equality, Socialism, Peace, Environmentalism, Community and Trade Unionism. When did you join the party, and what made you join? Because I know you've been an activist for quite a long time. So.
Yeah, I joined the Respect Party shortly after the Bradford Spring, where George got elected at the last by-election. And partly because I think Britain does need a strong left alternative to what we see as mainstream Labour or New Labour or Blue Labour policy. My view is that, you know, society needs a radical distribution of money away from the richest to support the poorest, and therefore Respect seems to be the right party for me. Plus, George Galloway's a maverick, and I'm a maverick, so
right, okay.
We're riding shotgun at the moment.
Right, okay. Can you just tell me, I'm going to come to you in a minute, Rashid, but can you just tell me a little bit about your background? For those of people that don't know, obviously a lot of people know you, but there's a lot of people that wouldn't know your story. So just give us a little, little synopsis of who Lee Jasper is, you know, where you came from, and.
Well, born in Cheetham Hill, north side of Manchester.
Yeah.
Grew up in a combination of places: Oldham, just outside Manchester, and Moss Side. Manchester, went to jail, read Malcolm X, converted to. I nearly said Islam then. Converted to radical black politics.
We've got a bean pie for you,
from
man.
being in jail.
From being in jail, yeah. Read Malcolm X, came out, had a long lecture from my family. My grandfather's from Sierra Leone, so
Right.
it's a traditional African family, where I got lectured on the family name coming out of jail. Went to university, got my degree, came to London, started in activism, started the National Black Caucus, worked at the Mangrove and All Saints Road, West London, fought for Frank Critchlow and the Mangrove 9 and 11 trials, Stephen Lawrence, Roland Adams, the forgotten soldier. Everybody talks about Stephen Lawrence. Roland Adams died before Stephen, and his family are just completely ignored. Roland Adams and injustice campaigns, ad infinitum, founder of Operation Black Vote, Unite Against Fascism.
You're relentless, aren't you? You're just on this thing.
I packed a lot in.
Yeah, you have. Okay, Rashid, just tell us a little bit about your background as well, just for the viewers that don't know who you are, and you know why you're standing for the Green Party, another kind of voice of the left.
Sure.
We've got a quite leftist show on today.
Green and black, baby.
Best chocolate out there. The best chocolate out there.
Green and black, all you.
Well, my history is not as colourful as Mr. Jasper's, but we've kind of crossed again over
many years.
Okay.
About 25 years now, Mr. J.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a son of the soil of South London, born and raised. Parents come from Barbados, you know, typical Bajans, bourgeoisie family with their sensibilities. Me, I was.
Do you eat souse?
Do I? Nah, no? You're mad. Not even as a
cuckoo. Eat cuckoo.
Cuckoo I'll eat. Flying fish I eat. Souse ain't touching it.
Okay.
I mean, no pigtail, no pig ears, no pig snout. No.
What?
And even as a youth, I would never touch that stuff.
Okay.
It would look kind of strange to me.
And it kind of wouldn't fit in with your kind of green credentials, would it? To be.
Well, even as a child. You know,
it's greener to eat the pig feet than it is to eat the steak.
Is that right? Well, I don't eat steak either. I don't touch none of them. You've done none of them.
No, I'm not advocating you one should eat them, but it is greener.
Okay, I hear that.
Yeah.
So a child of the soil of South London, and like I said, my parents, you know, were kind of bourgeoisie type of parents because that's the background that we come from in the Caribbean.
Right.
And I was always drawn to the excitement of what was happening out on the road. I just liked the road vibration, you know. Right. So I got caught up in certain little things, and you know, ended up going to university in this is like the early 90s maybe. Went to university, And it just so happened that my man's organisation was next door to the university.
Right. Okay. So you've got quite
where I was studying, and you know, we was on campus, and we, you know, like I said, I took the road sensibility into the campus.
Right.
So at the time, I just stood out as being like, why are you here? And I was just hustling my way through university. Right. And then when I got politicised, when certain things started happening, like i.e. the Roland Adams stuff, that really kind of opened my eyes. So Mr. Jasper, you know, to his credit, kind of put out a call to find out who are these guys on campus that are making the most noise. And I was one of the brothers.
Right.
And I wouldn't, and he'd always invite me to meetings, and I would never turn up to his meetings.
Why?
Because I wasn't really...
You're just doing your own thing.
I was doing my own thing.
Can I just ask you both a question? Because you've both alluded to the fact that you know, you kind of had a misspent youth at certain occasions. You said you ended up in prison. I'm not sure what for. And obviously this is a story that we hear quite a lot. So, and that doesn't seem to have changed for, you know, for a lot of people. Why do you think that the message is not getting through from generation to generation to kind of avoid that trap? I mean, we know the traps are there, but
I think it's like I don't know about Jay's case. I mean, sorry, Mr. Jasper's case. I call him Jay.
Okay.
Yeah? I don't think in Mr. Jasper's case. So I can't really comment. But what I would say is that with a lot
getting into trouble,
with a lot of the younger heads today, they see that as being kind of like a rites of passage. It's like if you haven't been to jail, then you can't be a rapper. That's the mentality.
You think so?
That's the mindset, because he's not real. Whereas for me, when I was coming up, it was like I wanted to make money. I wanted to hustle. I didn't want to work for anybody. So there's only certain things I could do. And then it just so happened that the people around me that was really giving me the knowledge of, they were the hustlers. So there's like, yo, you wanna do this thing? This is how you do this thing.
Right.
So they schooled me. So I got my street knowledge first. Then I went to university. So when I'm going through university, I'm kind of like a different person, because I'm now seeing all the hustles that are being run at a multitude of levels. Right. And I'd say with the young guys today that are going into that street life stuff, who are getting worse and worse and worse with it, you got to ask yourself, like, son, are you really serious about what it is you're doing? Because you're wasting time, you're giving jobs to police, you're giving jobs to judges, you're providing employment, whereas, you know, we was a little bit ahead of the curve.
Okay, but perhaps that people, or they feel that society doesn't actually have a place for them. But coming on from that conversation, definitely want to talk to you about this, Lee, because it's been, you know, and I know you want to talk to me about it. It's this whole Trevor Phillips thing. So talking about stereotypes and, you know, racism and why certain demographics might do certain things, you know, why young black boys are stopped by police. Is it because they're more likely to be engaging in criminal activity, etc., etc.? But Trevor Phillips is coming out with this documentary today on Channel. I shouldn't really probably mention the other media company, should I? But he's doing this documentary about race and the things that people are afraid to say. You've never really been afraid to say it, but obviously there's people out there that are. And from what I can tell from your Twitter stream, talking to you, you seem quite incensed by it. So can you just give me your thoughts on what is bugging you about what Trevor said?
Well, I think I've always had a problem with Trevor Phillips because he represents an ignoble tradition in our community where a black, high-profile black face in a high place gets paid lots of money to say those things that white people would love to say but never feel confident enough to say. And so they pay somebody else to do that for them. And Trevor's been a convenient mouthpiece for the right wing and racists in this country, I think, for far too long.
Do you think he's, sorry to cut you, that's really bad, but do you think that he's consciously doing that?
Oh, I think he's absolutely consciously doing it.
Continue.
He's too intelligent not to be a conscious effort. You know, here we're talking about a man who, you know, appeared on the Great London Authority in 2000 till 2003, resigned to take the job at the CRE, went into the CRE from 2000 to 2006 and declared that institutionalised racism was dead and multiculturalism was a bad thing. Those are Trevor's leads that were then followed up by the Tory party and so on. And so when we see the regression around race equality, and if you look at the Runnymede Trust website, you see that their research into race inequality has proved in 7 key areas: housing, education, the economy, that health, that racial inequalities have broadened, got wider. The difference between a black citizen and a white citizen in terms of social mobility and equality, those gaps have widened over the last decade, then how can we be living in a post-racist society? How can the things that Trevor has been articulating actually be true? And I think the other thing that bugs me, and I'm going to say it loud and proud, you know, just because you're married to a white lady doesn't mean you have to try prostituting your politics on the rest of the community. That's the way you choose to live your life.
Okay,
At the end of the day, right, that, you know, let's all integrate, which is his major theme.
I mean,
Let's integrate.
That's quite an assassination of his character to say
No, well,
what you just said there.
I'm in assassination mode.
Okay, yeah. What I was going to say is, in Trevor Phillips's defence, or playing devil's, let's say playing devil's advocate, he, for example, he was on the radio today and he was saying, for example, that sometimes when we have these polarised conversations, we're actually harming the cause rather than furthering the cause. And from the impression what I got, his line is that he's trying to move the conversation beyond the kind of what I'm like, what you're like, what you think of me. It's like, how do we get beyond that to improve relations for everybody? Is that not what you see this as him as doing?
It can't possibly be a rational response to racism as it currently exists, because we know that Trevor's whole approach is about the pathologization of black people. He wants to determine that the reason you suffer racism is because you're making bad lifestyle choices.
Why do you think he would do that? Why would a black man...
Because never as a community, in the long struggle for racial equality, never has one community sacrificed so much for the furtherance of one man's career, right? That's why he's done it.
Rashid
Up that economic greasy pole ladder. And the thing is, if he wanted to be a lord or something, he should have just asked us. We would have given it him without all of this cost of regressing the race equality.
Trevor, if you do want to come on to like challenge any of these, you're quite welcome. But Rashid, I think you've got something to step in and say.
Well, I was going to say, just to build upon this, I mean, I've met Mr. Phillips on several occasions. And what struck me about him was that he's a very political, small p person in terms of how he will maneuver. Whereas someone like Mr. J will just say it as it is and say, you know what, I'm going to speak my mind and the chips will fall where they're going to fall. But I'm big enough to take it. Trevor will kind of play a slightly more conniving game to forward his personal agenda. That's what I've recognised with Trevor.
What he was talking
So that, and what that does is, especially from our side of the fence, it's very dangerous, because it then gives you the impression that, you know, black people are moving ahead and here's this Mr. Phillips and he's doing this and he's making these statements. And I'm not denying that there is a degree of personal responsibility that we all have to carry in terms of how we conduct ourselves. You know, I'm not saying that we are completely without, you know, fault or whatever, but when you get people in leadership positions who have been given a platform and have the ear of certain people, you say, come on, man, at least talk the real talk. At least represent for the people.
Yeah, I mean, the impression I got today as well, listening to him, was that he's been at the UKIP conference, and it's almost like rather than advocating on behalf of maybe the black community, he's trying to create common understanding by saying, you know, I understand that perhaps white people in Britain feel disenfranchised within their own country, within their own communities. This is what he was saying.
Well, and if white people feel disenfranchised, what the hell do black people feel under the weight of austerity and racism? You know, this man's a joke. I don't even think it's nuanced. I think it's just crass opportunism. And it's writ large and you can see it. Trevor Phillips never says anything. If today's papers are to believe, Richard Littlejohn says that Trevor Phillips is the bravest man in Britain. Right, so you're going to be the poster boy for Richard Littlejohn.
Yes.
Come on now. And the thing is, I think we're too accommodating with him. We need to spit that.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but the reality is there is a wide demographic in this country, or there is, you know, the rise of UKIP is been happening because there's certain people in certain communities, just like we may feel marginalised in ours, that feel marginalised in theirs. And so how do we, you know, someone might never ever like me.
I'm not interested in UKIP's post-colonial melancholy for a brighter age when Britain ruled the waves and had empire, right? If you're depressed and sad about that, well, that's tough for you, because it's never going to return, and it's a concept that is completely inimical to multicultural Britain. right? So I can understand that some white people feel deeply anxious because, you know, the fact is that with the economy in the state it is, they've lost their privilege, right? But don't expect us as black people now to throw up our hands in super sensitivity and say, oh, well, because a few middle-class white people are now feeling the economic pinch, that we should abandon our politics on racism because it might offend them and they might go further to the right. You know, my view is quite simple, that racism is a reality. Trevor Phillips is an apologist for racism, and that's been demonstrated. He's the man who closed down the CRE. He's the man who declared Britain was a post-racist society. He's the man that said multiculturalism leads to extremism. He's a man that, you know, has been the chair of the Council for Ethnic Minority Voluntary Organisations. We see 15 million, 600,000 went missing. Lord Battier gets prosecuted. Trevor Phillips is the trustee. There are things about this man's charge record that, if read in a revolutionary court, you know, would lead to swift justice.
Do you remember going back, it must have been, I think maybe 1999, when Ken Livingstone split from the Labour Party to run as mayor. Can I just finish this very quick point? And Ken Livingstone offered Trevor Phillips the chance to be his deputy. Trevor Phillips put a statement out saying it's racism that you'd have the black man as your deputy, and he made all this noise, and I thought, wow, okay, so Trevor's now got some testicular fortitude and he's speaking up for himself. And then what did Trevor do? Trevor ran as deputy for Frank Dobson. And I thought, but a couple months ago you were saying it's an offence to have a black man as your deputy, but now you're willingly going as the deputy. And I think him making that move really made me realise, wow, this is a completely political, small p black man here.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to have to go for a break. It's been really, really interesting so far. Remember, guys, if you want to dial in, it's 0208 808 0693. Phone in and ask Lee or Rashid any questions about this subject or some of the others that we're going to cover. So we're going to go for a quick break and we'll see you afterwards. Okay.
Cool. All right.
Trevor.
Live.
Maintaining operational excellence, an efficient fleet, and team friendliness. Flying demands the best of safety procedures, and that is why we are abreast of global standards delivered by top technicians using some of the most advanced. At Arik Air, we don't just believe in flying, we are passionate about the flying experience. An experience that safely delivers you at each destination, feeling comfort and pleasure. An experience which truly keeps you closer to your dreams. This is our vision, today, tomorrow, and beyond. Arik Air, Africa's fastest growing air.
Okay, we're back from the quick break, and yeah, it's been very, very interesting talking to Lee and Rashid about this Trevor Phillips situation, and it'll be really, really interesting to watch the documentary tonight. And I believe that we have a caller on the line. I'm not sure who that is, but hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, who's speaking, please?
This is Denton in Merton.
Hi, Denton. Hope you're well.
Yes, I am.
What's your question?
My question is, are we in a position where we might have to start calling for a racism czar?
Okay, Lee, are we in a position where we might have to call it for a racism czar?
Well, I don't think there's one thing that solves our position. But certainly if we had ministerial responsibility for tackling racism at cabinet level, that might go a long way to dealing with our problem. I bet not a single black person in Britain knows that under the Tory government, the Minister for Race was an MP called Andrew Stumley. Nobody will know that. Nobody knows him. Nobody knows that race was a priority because it wasn't. So I think there's some merit in that, but it has to be part of a broader package of measures, including the introduction and strengthening of race anti-discriminatory legislation and bringing back the Commission for Racial Equality.
Because that's kind of what that was supposed to be for, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So it's kind of, so we've kind of got a vacuum.
So as part of a package of measures, that'd be an important element of it.
Denton, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why did you ask that question? Do you think we need a race czar?
Well, Lee will know of my rhetoric from a previous interaction we had on the radio station.
Yeah.
But my argument has long since been, I'm a 57-year-old black man who has been through the riots and everything that's happened in this country in relation to our community. And the
Well, that's a fair point, and I suppose maybe if we had some representation in the Home Office, perhaps a lot of files would still not be missing. I don't know.
This is it. I throw a question up to everybody. Does anybody know what's happened to the Smiley culture case?
Yeah.
Rashid, want to jump in there?
The last thing I heard regarding the Smiley culture case was that Smiley stabbed himself. That's the official line, and the officers weren't charged, and that was it. Case done. Pardon me?
Has he been buried?
Smiley was buried a long time ago. I can update further. I mean, as well as being the inquest finding that Smiley supposedly, in quotes, killed himself, his family decided that they didn't want to continue with the campaign for their own reasons. And I think that whilst people might speculate about that, one can't underestimate the trauma somebody goes through when you've lost somebody in those circumstances. And it affects every family in different ways. But I'm still passionate about what happened to Smiley culture, as I am about what happened to Mark Duggan and every other black person who dies in custody.
I'm there with you. And what I'm really angered about is that as spokesman for me, personally, as spokesman for me, I don't like the way that you're being marginalised, so to speak. And it's being done under this banner of he's a black activist. What does this word activist actually mean? Does it mean that this man is active in the black community, or does it mean this man is active on behalf of the black community, upsetting the white folk? And on that note, I'll say goodbye.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Can I ask Denton before you go?
Yes.
Before you go, you know you said you was angry. Yeah. What do you do with your anger? Where do you challenge it? I mean, where does it go? Because you put your anger in your right. You beat them hard.
I educate.
Go on, Denton.
About how the anger develops for me and how they're going to go through life and avoid that anger and be better contributors to my community.
Well, thank you for calling in. Really appreciate that, Denton. So take care. Thank you.
Can I just explore one more point?
Okay.
I don't want it to be misunderstood. You move on.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right? There are certain high-profile black men, the majority of whom are married to white women, whose politics are then articulated against radical black activists. I'm a black activist who's married to a black woman, right? I have no apology to make for anybody in relation to that. But it seems as though that the domination of the debate around anti-racism is being led with people who are married to white people. And what I'm saying is that I think they're becoming apologists because of their own personal situation. Now, I don't care who you marry. I don't care who you marry, right? I'm open to you go marry anybody you like, right? But do not seek to dominate the debate about race because of your own personal situation. Putting that on it is to disenfranchise millions of black people. I just wanted to make that clear.
Just on that note, what would you say to the claim of people? I've seen some of them on Twitter that say that you're actually racist. You know that argument, well, that you're racist because of that.
Well, that's water off a duck's back to me. I don't pay any mind to it. I don't pay any attention to it. I fought racism all my life, and I will continue to fight racism.
So do you have a problem with white people per se?
I don't have a problem with I have a problem with racist white people, and I will challenge them every day. So, I've got white people in my family. Look, you don't come as light skinned as I get without having some of that in you. But at the same time, I'm not foolish enough to think that my personal family circumstances, where they treat me as an individual, can be extended to every youth on the road. I know they don't have that. They don't get that equal treatment.
Okay, let's move on. It's budget time.
Budget time.
George Osborne. If you have a look at him there, looking fine in all his fineries with his briefcase. What do you think about George Osborne's current budget? And who do you think the budget... Cause it's been lauded in a lot of the press as, a fairly good budget, and we've got this line that Britain's now on the road to recovery and that more people are in work and, we're on track.
It's a Kool-Aid budget.
A Kool-Aid budget. That's a new one. What does that mean?
Kool-Aid budget. In the United States, they talk about people drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right.
In relation to a real infamous matter that happened about 30 years ago when the people drank the Kool-Aid that was laced with cyanide and they all died.
Yes.
It's a Kool-Aid budget. That budget, you can see that 49 days before the election, it's a perfect Kool-Aid budget because people actually start to believe, you know, he's talking about, oh, the sun's shining and we're fixing the roof. Really?
Right. I think
Really?
that was a headline somewhere.
That's the
wasn't it?
headline. That's the quote. We're fixing the roof.
Yeah. So it's not there yet, but it's all in hand, and we've got it under control.
Take his budget and tell that to the people that are earning £8, £9, £10 an hour that are trying to live in any city in the UK. Tell it to them about the sun shining.
I mean, tell it to them. You know, you heard what Rashid said. I mean, he has done something. For example, I'm a self-employed person, and he's now going to change it so you don't have to do these tax returns. That's gonna win a lot of people over because they're really annoying. You know, things like that. And he's cutting rates for savers. So he is appealing to those things which people may have been concerned about. He's opening up more things for first-time buyers. So I understand the argument of those people at the bottom that are struggling, that we know are struggling, that we see are struggling. But what do you think about some of these other things that he's done, which may be quite beneficial?
Well, they're talking about something called introducing what they call the Google tax. Yeah?
What's that?
So they're talking about how corporations, some of the loopholes that they use will be, you know, tightened up,
yeah.
And they're going to raise an extra. They estimate, I think it's about $3 billion. They was talking about. Last year, according to UK Uncut, who look at the tax avoidance, tax evasion in this country, £125 billion at least was avoided. The total government expenditure is about 650 billion. So you're talking about 1/5 of all the government expenditure is being fitted away. So here he comes with this Google tax to get 3 billion, and there's a missing 125 bill. So when people start to drink the Kool-Aid, the Google tax sounds like a really wonderful idea.
Yeah.
But to know that there are companies that are operating like HSBC who have their whole little offshore Swiss bank accounts, showing their high worth individuals how to avoid, and at the same time donating money to political parties, it's a Kool-Aid
Well,
budget.
they have been. If you want to dial in, people, it's 0208 808 0693. Please do call in and ask these guys some questions. It'd be really nice to hear from you. But they have been tightening that up. So, for example, HBC has had to shut a lot of accounts that were in Switzerland, and I think there's been an hour drive for some accounts in Jersey. If you don't live in Jersey,
If
HSBC,
HMRC are not prosecuting anybody.
That's right.
Over the HSBC scandal. In fact, what they demonstrated through that documentary we saw is that people who were responsible for massive tax avoidance were given a preferential let-off. They were said, no, we're not going to prosecute you. Whereas people like you, if you avoid your tax as a self-employed person, you know the HMRC is coming for you and coming for you hard.
Yeah,
so we don't have tax justice in this country. Let me tell you the other thing about this so-called budget where the sun's shining and the roof is fixed. The underlying imbalance of payments for Britain has been deteriorating. That means that we're importing more and exporting less. Now, you can't tell me that an economy is on a sound basis when your exports are continually, your imports are continually growing and your exports are reducing. The other thing is about this so-called golden economy, bounce back, comeback kid economy, is it's based on £1.5 trillion of the Bank of England quantitative easing printing money. Now that money is going to be paid back at some time. So what we're having is we're in a situation where they are using smoke and mirrors. They're using sweeteners for people to say, we'll give you a little bit here and a little there, a sort of pre-election bribe. But the reality is that this austerity government has placed the greatest burden on the poorest members of society, who've seen a 20% drop in their overall incomes, while the rich have seen their income increase by 60%. Now that's not going to change. This budget's not going to change that. It's not going to change the fundamentals of the economy.
All this budget will do is it might get these boys that are in office right now re-elected so they can get another 5 years of doing what they're currently
doing. They're looking to get over the line.
That's all it is.
So what do you think the ideology is behind this kind of, let's put the burden on the most vulnerable and the poorest?
Restructure the economy. It's to restructure the economy.
See, why? What do you think that...
Well, just bear with me. Bear with me, okay. Right? Because for years, British workers here have lauded it over the fact that the man in Pakistan's getting paid a penny a day. right? Or the man in Africa, or a woman in Africa in some market is, you know, forced to sell their tomatoes for a penny each, and they come to Britain imported. So for years and years, British workers, British society has looked at the rest of the world who are being paid poverty wages, less than $1 a day, and felt privileged that we're not like that, because we're you know, we're so creative and entrepreneurial. Our society and country is flourishing. Now the capitalists, now big capital, world capital has woken up. If they can work for a penny a day, why can't you work for a penny a day? Now they're pushing you down where you thought previously you were elevated. Now you're being pushed down to the same level as Taiwan and China workers, right? As they reduce your structure. So what this is about? This is to restructure, crush trade unions, put you in 0-hour contracts, and pay you poverty wages.
Okay, I think we've got a caller. Hello?
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
I think, hello, who's speaking, please?
Yeah, my name's Patrick.
Hi, Patrick, and welcome to the show. Have you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question for the Jasper. Just listening to what he just said now. Lee just mentioned that we're in a situation where the country is importing more, I mean, exporting less.
Yeah.
Now, at what point over the last decade or so, probably the last 30 years, when did that happen? Was that a government policy? Because if you just said that, that means we're going backwards then, we're not moving forward. So, I mean, is it who has actually done this now? Why do we have that problem? You also mentioned things like some said easing, you know, printing money to actually boost the economy, so you can have money out there in society. So what is that happened? How can it be addressed?
Okay, so do you think you got that? I think he's asking, when did this start to happen?
It's been the case over the last 10 years.
Right.
So you'll find that the balance of payments have been in the red over the last 10 years. And what's happened is because Margaret Thatcher destroyed Britain's industrial base and decided to put the economy purely on a financial services footing, which led to the economic crash. When the crash came, we haven't got any factories, we haven't got any workers with skills to make the things that we can export. So our industrial base has gone, crushed under Thatcherism and neoliberalism. The Tories and the new blue Labour, because they're not on the blue side of the Tory party, didn't invest in creating manufacture or industrialism. And this government, right, has put all its eggs in the financial services basket. That's why you're getting a big economy. All that economic growth they're talking about yesterday in the papers is largely bankers' bonuses.
Are you still there?
And if they weren't selling off the assets, like Royal Mail, half of the NHS, they wouldn't even be in credit surplus for the nation. Take away those assets, and the economy is in deficit. They boosted it up, and you know what? They haven't even sold them today. They put it in the paper like we're in credit in this country, but they're planning to sell off the assets next year, but they're accounting for it today. This is a smoke and mirrors budget.
Okay, are you still there, Patrick? Okay, Patrick's gone.
Yeah.
What I want to ask you then is, in terms of what you've just said, do you think that, Rashid, you step in for me to say what you think about that.
Well, I was going to say, in relation to what Patrick was saying, and to build upon what Mr. Jasper was saying, the Sunday Times, they have an annual rich list.
Yes.
You know, so they publish the chart for Britain's super wealthy individuals.
Yes.
And I remember at the height of the so-called, like we're still in it. So the height probably still there. But I remember financial year 2010, 2011, when the Sunday Times published its rich list, the wealth of the super wealthy in this country in 1 year at the height of the recession increased by 29%.
Right.
These are people that have over 500 mil, a billion, billions. These guys, their wealth increased by nearly 30% at a time when people were having to visit food banks in South London.
That's right.
So that's what I wanted to ask.
Restructuring the whole of British society.
So in terms of this financial services kind of emphasis that we're under, what could we do then to kind of re-establish manufacturing? Obviously, this government doesn't seem to have a will to do anything like that, but what kind of things could we put in place? And you're in the Green Party, things like renewable energy and stuff like that, you know, the depletion of fossil fuels. What do you think that we could actually do in a positive way to solve some of these problems?
Well, I'd say first up, obviously, we're 49 days from election. I'm standing as an MP, so obviously I'm going to tell you straight, vote Green. because
But you'd say vote respect, wouldn't you?
or even vote respect.
But I say vote green where he's standing.
Right.
Because, you know, I don't believe in partisan politics. We may be different, but we share the different parties, but we share the same philosophies. So if we haven't got a respect candidate in his area.
Right.
So we say vote green when it comes to Rashid Nix.
Okay, continue.
Because what you're seeing, the way, and Lee uses the term blue Labour. So Labour are basically pursuing conservative policies. I remember there was one thing, it was in 97, when Tony Blair and New Labour were swept to power, you know, huge majority,
Yes.
you know, conservatives, all their ideas, what we believe were all thrown out. And there was an interview with a gentleman called Sir Marcus Fox of the 1922 Select Committee. He was a Conservative MP, very influential, very long track record. And so he lost his seat up in Yorkshire, and they interviewed him, and the presenter, the interviewer, was kind of gloating. Sir Marcus, you know, you lost your seat after 50 years of being here. You know, blah, 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 blah. What do you say? And Sir Marcus Fox said one thing, and to his credit, he was very straight about it. He said, we didn't lose this election because of policies. We lost it on personalities. Because as the Conservatives had all our infighting, we appeared disunited, and Labour appeared to be united. He said, however, if you look at all of Labour's policies, they're all our policies anyway. He said, so what it proves, this was in 97, he said, what it proves is, he said, we're now all Maggie's children, even New Labour. And when he said that, I switched off my TV, I went to my bed. Because at that point, that's nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
All Labour have done since then is move further and further to the right, and the Conservatives have moved further right as well. And here you are, so you've got the alternative. People think, oh, I vote Labour. So many black people out there will go on May the 7th and vote Labour because that's what they do.
Yeah.
Not realising that the Labour that they were voting for back in 1970, whenever, doesn't exist anymore. That's dead. That's like the dinosaurs. That's gone, you know? And so we'll go and we'll give up our vote because we're very tribal with our politics, not realising that we're like turkeys who are voting for Christmas. So the reality is that, you know, you go out, you use your common sense, you look at what's really on offer. There's a website called Vote for Policies.
Okay.
Vote for Policies.
Vote for policies.
It's like remember the old Pepsi challenge? You do the
Yes.
Yeah, you do the blind taste test.
Yes.
So it takes away the names of the parties and it just
Okay.
sets out the policies. So you look at and you vote on the policies.
Okay.
And at the end of the survey, it tells you where your political allegiance lies.
Right,
And you'd
okay.
be very, very surprised at what
Vote
comes
for
up.
policies, guys. That's a good tip.
Because
Thanks,
Greens
Rashid.
come out on top.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
On policy.
Okay.
On
Okay.
policies.
I'm going to move on a little bit. Thank you for that last little debate. Lee, recently you were part of a conference called Corruption, Spying, Racism and Accountability. Can you tell me a little bit about that conference and how you got involved? Because I saw there was quite some esteemed people on the panel. You had Greens, is it Jenny Jones?
Jenny Jones.
Yeah.
Plus you had people like Paul Lawrence, Stephen Lawrence's brother. And you even had some call-in from Peter Francis, who was the whistleblower police
right.
officer. So can you just tell us a little bit about this conference and how come you were involved?
It was a partnership conference between the monitoring group, Stafford Scott, Suresh Grover over at the monitoring group,
Yeah.
and long-established campaigners on police corruption. And the Centre for Criminal Justice Studies came together to have a 2-day conference. The first day was largely academics.
Was it open to the public?
It was open to the public,
Wonderful.
about 400 people at the conference itself. The first day was around looking at academics and their research onto the issue, which provided some fascinating insights. And the second day was focused on families. And so we had victims of police corruption. So we had women who had been spied upon, who the police had targeted with undercover police officers, who'd stuck up a 4-year relationship with a woman, had a child, and then disappeared overnight when the police pulled him out of his undercover role. We had Peter Francis, who said his task was to spy on black organisations, funny enough, including the Roland Adams family and the Stephen Lawrence and the Wayne and Brian Douglas campaigns, all of those campaigns in the 80s, that the police were actually spying on victims of racism instead of going out and catching the perpetrators. And of course now we've got this huge inquiry that is going to take place, looking at police corruption, in which all this evidence is going to be put before a panel and a judge and an inquiry. But it was absolutely astounding. What's interesting is that corruption and racism in the police service is getting worse year on year.
And what makes you say that?
Well, first of all, more black officers are leaving the force and joining. Secondly, more black officers get disciplined than anybody else. Thirdly, stop and searches rose relentlessly in terms of targeting black youth. Thirdly, that the disproportionate nature of charging. If you're a white youth and a black youth and they both steal a loaf of bread and you go to a police court and go to the police station, the white youth is 50% more likely to be given a caution and the black youth entered into for criminal trial. So from the very get-go of policing on the streets, you can see disproportionate impact right throughout the criminal justice system. And that's why racism within the police force has been given the green light. Again, going back to my man Trevor Phillips, he said that police force is no longer institutionalised racist. He agrees with the Commissioner's analysis of that. And so they abandoned all the post-Lawrence mechanisms that they were designed to put scrutiny in check, and now racism has flourished as a result. I'm
quite surprised at what you said, that more black police officers are leaving the force, because, you know, we always have this big drive that we need to have more inclusion, we need more, you know, especially in the Met Police, we need more representation that actually represents London. So you're saying that people are actually leaving
net loss. A net loss. The figure's going down. Look at the example of Carol Howard, poster girl for the Met.
Yes.
Yeah, black woman.
Yeah,
big machine gun. Right. Look at the one who's protecting Kate Middleton, Ricky Haruna, a black woman, personal bodyguard to Kate Middleton. Look at the black gay policeman, Kevin Maxwell. And look at their experience. I mean, look at Belgravia Police Station.
What's the experience been? What's actually going on?
They are being targeted in the worst. Carol Howard was fitted up for child pornography. Her boss actually, and it was demonstrated in court in the employment tribunal, that he, along with others, had sought to arrest her for child pornography because she texted a picture of her own child that was in the bath at the time to the child's father, and they arrested her for child pornography.
So do you think this goes to the kind of heart of what we're talking about with this corruption and spying, that literally it's happening within the service, you know, to target minority people within the service, to kind of push them out and so they can carry on with what seems to be, from the conference I saw and I watched some of the videos, I was actually, it's not things I didn't know, but I was actually quite shocked to hear some of the families and to what they said had happened to them. I was quite disturbed by what's actually going on in the Metropolitan Police Service.
That's only the tip of the iceberg, in my view. It's the tip of the iceberg. We have institutionalised corruption, not just institutionalised racism within the Metropolitan Police Service. You know, everything from the police officer saying to the little boy in the back of the van, you know, your problem is you'll always be a nigger. Goes to court, doesn't get disciplined by the police, right? So he's not sacked, he's still a serving officer, right? They took it to court, the judge said, well, I don't think that's a racist description. So now calling black boys niggers by police officers is a legitimate activity. It's absolutely unprecedented, the level of corruption that we're saying. And you've got to say to the Met Black Police Officers Association and the National Black Police Officers Association, you know, we have to pick up that fight and that struggle within the service, because right now we're you know, if we're advancing in the right if we're advancing as a people, then we're advancing in the wrong direction.
I think it's really interesting to note that in you know, 2015, 800 years since the Magna Carta, you know, looking back, you know, and we use the example of Stephen Lawrence and the Lawrence Inquiry that, you know, Mr. J was very instrumental in happening. I was one of the guys that was involved in delivering the diversity training to the police officers.
Oh, really?
Back in like 2000.
I think they resent that though, don't they, being given diversity training?
You know, what I found really interesting, because we started, and it really gave me an insight into the workings of police, because, you know, to have been, my relationship with police was always, I'm in cuffs, I'm in the van,
right,
I'm in cells, you know, I'm getting stop and search.
Yes.
And I didn't allow my, you know, my personal history to really, you know, have too much sway on the fact that I was being employed to train police officers.
Right.
And we started at the senior level, which they call the ACPO, which is the Association of Chief Police Officers. So these are like borough commanders, these types of guys. Then you come right down, you work your way down to the operations level, the guys on the street. And it's really interesting looking at the change in culture as you get down and down and down. So the guys on the ACPO level, these are quite intelligent people. So how we can have a discussion and, oh, well, I read this in this book, you know, Rashid, and you have a discussion about stuff and you can agree to disagree. But then when you start getting past a certain level, you're dealing with men that are reading like the Sunday Sport.
Right.
And you're trying to have an intellectual conversation saying, but look, the evidence says this. And you're like, wow, you're trying to turn around a battleship with somebody.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, Lee.
I've got a UKIP person who was a UKIP press officer.
Yes.
She complained about the racism in UKIP, right? UKIP tried to prosecute her, right? Saying that she'd stole money from Jeffrey Bloom, MEP, and so on. It all went to court.
I remember a little bit about that.
You remember? Right. Now, what we found out is since then is that there is a cell of UKIP officers. There is a cell of UKIP officers in the Metropolitan Police Service. I haven't got time to give you the full story now,
Right,
but
okay.
Jasna Badzak, go to my blog spot and read the story of Jasna Badzak. Because here is a white lady who's a Tory from a UKIP member who was subject to police corruption because what I think is now a big problem is they've got so many UKIP members supporting the UKIP party who are in positions of power in social services, in schools, in the police services. And you're wondering out, sitting outside saying, why does that decision go against me?
Right.
I'm telling you, there's UKIP cells of those people in public services who are discriminating on a daily basis against our people.
Well, carrying on from that corruption, I want to tell you a little bit about this story. It's child abuse cover-up. Was this man murdered to shut him up? Now, this is a story about a guy called Bulik Forsyth, and his daughter was on the TV the other day. She was born, I think she must have been born after he died. So she's never met him, but she's, you know, kept his campaign alive. I'll just show you the cover there. And it's actually now believed that he was perhaps murdered at part of Lambeth Council because he may have been discovering some kind of paedophile ring that was going on within the council, within the building. I mean, I know you've been in politics for a long time. What have you heard about any of these scandals that are coming to the fore now, but clearly have been going on for a long time and have been swept under the carpet, have been, you know, we've got corrupt officers, because it's all coming out now. Officers are coming forward, and I think part of this conference that you were at was to say we should have a way to protect whistleblowers so that they can come forward, because the Official Secrets Acts mean that a lot of these people are not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to kind of say what they know.
Well, of course, we've just seen the police officers, retired police officers, saying they were instructed to give up the investigation into Cyril Smith after they caught him in situ, red-handed, abusing a boy after they raided his flat at Dolphin Square. I think it was Dolphin Square, but certainly raided a flat in which he was caught in flagrante with a boy. And the officer was told, it was on BBC Newsnight last night, you do not mention this, you don't talk about it, and if you do, we're going to prosecute you under the Children's Act.
So who are all these people that...
You remember the Belgium scandal a few years ago, where there was the Belgian paedophile scandal,
Yeah.
and the national question was, are we a paedophilic culture? I think the national question for Britain is, are we a paedophilic culture?
Wow.
Because I think that when you look at the level of collusion between the wealthy and the elite and so on and so forth around the issue of grooming and child sex abuse, I think it's legion. But I also think it's a question that is not sufficiently addressed within our own community.
True.
Because some of the highest levels of sexual exploitation are young black women. Some of the highest levels of domestic violence murders are young black women, and we're not addressing that question in our own community. So yeah, we've got questions for everybody else, but not without questions for ourselves.
I think that's a good point, because we had a lady on last week who was talking about, you know, we talked about the Rotherham, a Pakistani lady, and also Trevor Phillips mentioned it today as well. You know, we've all got things in our community and we can be quite protective, but it's surely time to start bringing all of our foibles out into the open to say, yes, in our community, this goes on. You know, these things happen. And
yeah, but those guys in Rotherham, those Pakistanis in Rotherham were not investigated because of political correctness. Those guys in Rotherham were not investigated because they shared a culture of paedophilia with the investigators, the police. That's why they weren't investigated. But Trevor wants to wrap it up as if people were fighting to speak about it because they were Asian. No, those Asian people.
To be fair, he didn't say that. But I'm talking about the general debate in terms of people feeling that they can't kind of,
Listen,
they're protecting the culture.
I don't recognise that nobody's being restrained about talking about black folks in a negative way.
It's been a really great show, and I didn't even get to ask you my question about Kendrick Lamar.
We'll come back next week.
Kendrick again.
I've listened to the album, it's actually fantastic, so get it, people. But it's been a really brilliant show, guys. Thank you for coming. I've really enjoyed having you on, and as expected, you kind of shot from the hip. We would expect no less, Lee. So thank you very much. Thank you, Rashid, for coming back. I really, really appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again next week, and Lester should be back. Lester, if you're out there, holla. Okay, take care. Bye.
Holla. I thought it was